Hi everyone. In today's video, I will tell you how to write an effective discussion section of your research, whether it's a research paper or it is your thesis. Today I'll tell you what is exactly a discussion, what it is not, and what are the things that you should be avoiding in your discussion section. All right, so let's get started. A discussion, you should know, is not a conclusion. All right, so there's a difference between discussion and conclusion. Conclusion is something where you are summarizing your research, briefly highlighting the findings, and maybe discussing the avenues of future work. Just a brief discussion. All right, this should be very brief. All right, so even if it's a research paper, it should probably be not more than half a page. This is just recommendation. Of course, you can go up to a page. Some people write more than a page, but I would prefer that conclusion should not be more than half a page. And if it's a thesis, then not more than 1 to 1.5 pages, maximum I think 2 pages long. This should be a conclusion, which is, it's kind of like a summarizing. It just brings everything together, just to provide a quick snapshot of what your research was all about, what were the findings, the highlighted findings, and avenues of further work. Maybe that's it. But what exactly is discussion? Let's get started with what is discussion. Firstly, in discussion, all right, what should you include? So elements to include in a discussion. First thing would be, make sure that you highlight, not only highlight, but state the major findings of your study. All right, that is the discussion. You will highlight, you will create the impact. This is the section where you create that impact of your research. So it should begin with a statement of the major findings of the study, and it should be the first paragraph in the discussion. It should be a direct, declarative, and succinct proclamation of your study results. All right, so here you can something like, you can start with some sentence like, our results confirm something on these words. All right, that no ambiguity found. Phrases and words like these will attract the attention of the reader. What should be included next? Explain the meaning. So here you can expand on the findings, explain the meaning of your findings, which you can't do in the conclusion, because conclusion is a much shorter section. Why these findings are important, what it means for the reader, or what it means for the community, what it means for the people or the area where you have created this impact, why these findings are important. All right, so no one has thought as long as hard about your study as you have. So as a person who has conceived, designed, and conducted the study, the meaning of the results and their importance seem obvious to you. However, they might not be so clear for the person who's reading your paper or your thesis for the first time. So here, make sure you highlight the findings without sounding, or without appearing rather, arrogant. It's not your arrogance. It's based on, your findings are based on your data, and it's your data that's confirming your findings. So that is what you have to highlight. So you have to be very scientific about it, very objective about it. All right, so even the smallest to the biggest, make sure you highlight your findings. What's the third thing you must include? Relate the findings. All right, relate your own research findings to those of similar studies. All right, hopefully you have not replicated anybody's studies, but even if you have, even then you can make a comparison. All right, so no study can be so novel that no one has discussed it before. So try and relate it, compare it. You may say that um, how your study differed from others, right? Right? How you took the work of others and added to it, right? What was your contribution? What was your noble contribution? So not only compare the findings, but talk about how you improved on it, or how you added to it, something like that, right? What's the fourth thing you will include? The fourth thing is consider the alternative explanation. All right, something, a word used to describe this is talk about the implications, what it means for the people who will be interested in your study. So despite efforts to remain objective and to maintain no bias, it is considered that explanation will still fit somewhat your bias. That is what your reviewers or examiners might argue. So it is important to remember that the purpose of your research was to discover and not to prove anybody right or wrong. All right, so it is easy to fall into the trap of designing the study to prove your bias rather than to discover the truth. So when writing the discussion, it is important to carefully consider all possible explanations. So talk about the implications as well. What could a finding mean? All right, it could mean different things to different people. So consider the stakeholders, the different stakeholders, and how they would preview, or how they would perceive your research. And it is better that you state it before somebody else points it out. Number 5, state the clinical relevance of your findings. All right, here what you have to do is, the reason you normally conduct studies is to improve the care of whoever are the research participants, right? Whether they are students, whether it's a medical study for patients. So experimental studies conducted in the laboratory, usually they do not involve human subjects, but the results may have clinical implications, right? So then highlight it, state it, create that impact. Remember, your research is all about impact that you want to create in the field of work. So this is where you start talking about it. All right, in the discussion section itself, acknowledge your limitations as well. It is better that you acknowledge the limitations of your work rather than your examiner doing so and then failing your thesis based on that. All studies have limitations. All right, all studies have it. You cannot avoid limitations. Research is, of course, comes with its limitations. All right, however, some limitations could be very fatal. So you have to make sure that you address these limitations or explain these limitations. Your limitations should not be so serious that your research itself is disregarded by the community. They do not accept it. So most of the bias and the limitations should have been addressed in the research design. But once you have done and some of it was unavoidable, then you should acknowledge it. All right, so I'll give you an example where researchers said that they used only white or Caucasian subjects for their research. All right, in a way, how you can put it is that your future studies will research black, Hispanic, or other communities as well. All right, so this is a limitation if you have studied only one kind of community. But then if you acknowledge it and then you say that this was because of some logistical issue, or it was because of your research interest, and further work will investigate other communities, that's fine as well. All right, then here this is where you also talk about the way forward, your future work. What will be your future research? All right, so although a study may answer some questions will remain answered. You cannot answer all the questions. So ideally you should just take one small question and answer it, and then you can show the path or the avenues to further work. Remember, in that small question that you have answered, you should have answered it very well, but there will be some areas which it will lead into. so that you can identify it yourself and then give reasons as to why you did not do it, and then when do you intend to do it or how you intend to do it. All right, and then set up the discussion for a conclusion. This is from here, this is where you'll go into conclusion. So remember, in the conclusion you will include only what you have discussed previously. You will not introduce something new. So conclusion will have nothing new. It's discussion that has all the new things. All right, then what should we avoid? So things to avoid in a discussion, and this is also very important. Things to avoid in discussion. What should you not include in a discussion? Firstly, speculation, which is especially not based on data. All right, which is not based on your data. So you cannot just speculate, you cannot guess, you cannot predict anything, right? Even if you are predicting, then that should be based on a mathematical analysis or a regression analysis, but ideally you should not be speculating. So if the subjects in your study had asthma, it is usually not appropriate to speculate about how your findings might apply to other patient populations. Your study is then only to asthma patients. You cannot say that your study findings apply to people with all kinds of breathing problems. The second is, do not inflate the importance of your findings. All right, you have to be very objective, very scientific. You cannot overpromise what you have found or create an impact which has not there. So we all want to make a study, we all want to study or create a study which has an important contribution, which will be cited for generations. However, unwarranted findings or inflating the importance of findings which is not based on an objective analysis of data will then be refuted. People will not accept it. Third, do not go into a tangent and start discussing issues which were of no importance to your research focus. Remain focused. All right, it's very easy for the writer to get distracted, also to get excited. Once you start to summarize your findings, you may get excited and start discussing issues which you are passionate about but you have not investigated. If you have not investigated them, do not start going on to that pathway. Fourth, do not over criticize other researchers. All right, each research has their limitations, of course, and part of your critical analysis is to highlight the limitations of other research. But if you over criticize it, it makes you appear like a bully, which you should not. All right, so you have to make a comparative analysis. You can probably highlight limitations and then show how your research improved on the work. But being overcritical is not a scientific way of doing it. It makes you look like you are attacking the other investigators. All right, so I think this is what it's all about. So if you are writing your discussion section, be very careful that you do not confuse it for a conclusion. You write the discussion in a way that you set it up for a conclusion, and then remember that this is the section where you will highlight your findings, you will create that impact, but that has to be based completely on an objective analysis of your data collection and what you have done in the data stage, the analysis of the data, and your claims should be backed by your data. If it is not backed by your data, then do not make those claims. It will be called speculation, and then your discussion will be attacked by the examiners. So let me know, guys, what you thought about this video. I try to come out with new videos every time that can help you with your learning. I look forward to your comments and feedback. Thank you for watching this video. Bye.